Have you ever stopped to think about how a massive global industry, one that literally keeps the modern world spinning, could be born from a completely disastrous, kind of stinky kitchen accident? Well, today, in this explainer, we are looking at the incredible, tragic, and absolutely fascinating story of Charles Goodyear and his $100 billion mistake. This is a story of sheer obsession, catastrophic financial ruin, and a lucky stove fire that changed the course of human history.
I mean, think about a modern high-performance EV tire. It handles intense friction, carries massive weight, and survives freezing winters and scorching summers without breaking a sweat. Now, contrast that with what rubber used to be in the 19th century. We're talking foul-smelling, melting, rotting blobs of goo. Seriously. To understand how we got from that disgusting mess to the reliable materials we rely on today, we have to go back to a time when the world was absolutely desperate for a solution.
So, let's start with part 1, the gum problem.
Picture this. It's the 1830s, the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. Early transport and machinery desperately needed a flexible, waterproof material. But the stuff they had was, frankly, a total nightmare. Unvulcanized natural rubber had some fatal flaws. If you bought a rubber raincoat in the spring, by summer, it would literally melt onto your skin into a sticky, pungent goo. If you left your rubber boots outside in the winter, they would freeze and shatter like brittle glass. The emerging rubber industry was quite literally on the verge of total collapse.
Now, humans had actually known about this material for centuries. Indigenous Mesoamericans tapped what they called the weeping wood to make elastic balls, something Christopher Columbus even observed way back in 1493. Fast forward to 1770, and the British chemist Joseph Priestley named the material rubber simply because, well, it could rub out pencil marks. By 1823, Charles Mackintosh started sandwiching it between cloth to make waterproof raincoats, the famous Mackintoshes. But again, these early products were just hopelessly vulnerable to the weather. The industry was dying for a chemical miracle.
Which brings us to section 2, a career built on failure.
Enter Charles Goodyear. In the 1830s, Goodyear was a bankrupt hardware merchant from Connecticut, but he developed an absolute obsession with rubber that bordered on sheer madness. He was thoroughly convinced that this unstable material was the future of civilization. Just look at this interaction from 1834. Goodyear walked into a rubber company in New York to pitch a new valve he had designed. The manager looked at him, walked him into a warehouse full of rotting, melted rubber blobs, and told him, "You should have invented a better use for rubber, not the valve." That single, sarcastic comment accidentally sparked a ruinous, lifelong quest. Goodyear decided right then and there that he was going to be the man to fix rubber.
The problem? Goodyear didn't have the money, and he certainly didn't have the scientific training. This led to a life of constant, brutal spiraling. He was bankrupt in 1830, wiped out again in the financial panic of 1837. He dragged his poor family from city to city, desperately seeking investors. Get this, he actually conducted many of his experiments while locked inside various debtors' prisons, including one in Philadelphia and later even one in Paris.
His methods were, honestly, completely unhinged. He completely ignored his family's utter poverty just to chase this chemical formula. He begged for money. He sold his family's furnishings. He even pawned his own children's textbooks to buy supplies. He did spare his wife's china teacups, but only so he could use them as mixing bowls for raw rubber and turpentine. He subjected himself to incredibly toxic fumes, kneading rubber with nitric acid and lime in makeshift kitchens. His health suffered, his family starved, but he simply could not stop.
And that leads us to section 3. The stove that changed everything. Okay, so we pivot now from his intentional, systematic failures to a moment of pure, chaotic luck that actually shifted history. Goodyear had purchased an idea from a guy named Nathaniel Hayward. Hayward had noticed that dusting rubber with sulfur made it slightly less sticky in the sun. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a breadcrumb. So Goodyear started mixing his toxic, gummy batches with sulfur, praying for a breakthrough. It's 1839. In a factory in Woburn, Massachusetts, Goodyear is enthusiastically demonstrating his latest rubber and sulfur mixture. He's gesturing wildly, talking a mile a minute, and oops, he accidentally drops a piece of this sticky mass directly onto a red-hot stove. Now, based on everything known about rubber, it should have melted instantly into a puddle of foul-smelling soup. But instead, Goodyear noticed something miraculous. The charred mess didn't melt. It hardened. It formed a tough, flexible, leather-like ring. His ruined, accidental batch was the ultimate scientific breakthrough. He had accidentally discovered the exact process he'd been looking for. He perfected and patented it in 1844, calling it vulcanization.
named after Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, which is wonderfully ironic, isn't it? Elevating a literal kitchen stove mistake to a divine mythological status. Vulcanization is an irreversible chemical process that cures elastomers using heat and sulfur. But what is actually happening on a chemical level? Let's break it down.
Think of non-vulcanized rubber like a bowl of cooked spaghetti. The polymer chains are unconnected. They just slide all over one another easily, which is exactly what makes the material weak and prone to melting. But when you add sulfur and apply intense heat, like Goodyear did on that stove, you create permanent chemical bridges or crosslinks between those spaghetti strands. Suddenly, the molecules are locked together. The rubber can stretch, sure, but it snaps right back into its original shape. It is now dimensionally stable, permanently durable, and finally ready for industry.
All right, Section 4, from patent wars to global wheels.
So he did it. He solved the greatest industrial puzzle of the 19th century. You'd think Goodyear would be celebrated as a titan of industry, right? Rolling in cash? Well, no. Because he was so poor, and because the process took years to refine, Goodyear really struggled to secure his patents globally. Across the Atlantic, a British inventor named Thomas Hancock actually got his hands on some of Goodyear's samples, reverse-engineered the sulfur heat connection, and patented vulcanization in the UK. He beat Goodyear's US patent by just 8 weeks. This triggered incredibly chaotic, expensive, and stressful legal wars that consumed the rest of Goodyear's life.
And here is the ultimate tragic punchline of this whole story. Charles Goodyear, the man holding 60 patents for vulcanized rubber, the man whose invention was fundamentally changing the world, died in 1860, utterly penniless. He was $200,000 in debt. His obsession unlocked a multi-billion-dollar industry, but it gave him absolutely nothing but a lifetime of misery and a debtor's grave.
But wow, look at what his sacrifice enabled. Immediately after his breakthrough, the world just exploded with innovation. By 1845, Robert Thomson patented the pneumatic tire. By 1888, John Dunlop reinvented it for bicycles, sparking a massive global cycling craze. And just a few years later, vulcanized rubber became the critical component that allowed the internal combustion engine and the automobile to take over the world. Without Goodyear's stove accident, cars simply wouldn't have the tires, hoses, or belts needed to withstand the extreme heat of an engine.
Finally, Section 5, a world held together by rubber.
I really want to connect the sheer absurdity of Goodyear's obsession directly to your modern everyday reality. Because after this, global demand went completely parabolic. The early boom relied on wild trees in the Amazon, which created incredible wealth but devastated local ecosystems. To scale up, the British literally smuggled seeds out of Brazil to establish massive plantations in Southeast Asia. Then when World War II cut off those supply chains, scientists were forced to invent synthetic, petroleum-based rubbers. The infrastructure of the entire 20th century was literally built just to keep up with the demand sparked by Goodyear's invention.
And it's not just car tires, folks. We are talking about a $1 trillion global logistics network. The aerospace industry relies on vulcanized rubber for seals that can survive the vacuum of space and the heat of re-entry. Manufacturing relies on durable conveyor belts and anti-vibration mounts. The medical field relies on flexible, sterile tubing. Literally none of these modern industries can function without high-performance vulcanized polymers.
So, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you step into a car, or put on a pair of running shoes, or even just flick a rubber band, remember Charles Goodyear. Remember the bankrupt man who sold his kids' textbooks and accidentally dropped a toxic blob onto a hot stove. If the entire modern world is quite literally riding on a broke man's glorious mistake, how many of our other everyday essentials were born from chaotic failure? It's pretty wild to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.